going, Knicks fans? Welcome back to Fireside Knicks with your boys, Alex and Ryan. We're talking about Joel Embiid today, and kind of because Bradley Beal is now not on Washington, he's on the Phoenix Suns, and, the Knicks could have had a chance at acquiring him, and, the Washington Wizards didn't get a first-round pick for him, and I'm kind of confused, and Josh Hart's kind of confused, and we're all kind of like, why didn't the Knicks try, right? I feel like we're all kind of confused about it, and ultimately, the options are dwindling. We don't necessarily know what the Knicks are going to do this offseason. Is the Julius Randle-Jalen Brunson pairing going to win a championship? I'm going to say probably not. I think a Joel Embiid and Jalen Brunson duo has a better chance, that's for sure. But I want to talk about it. I want to talk about kind of the latest scoops, latest news about Joel Embiid, kind of what's going on there, and maybe alternative options will float out there that we'll discuss in some other episodes this offseason as we get through the offseason together, my friends. But Ryan, before we dive into the good stuff, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing all right. The Knicks are kind of in a weird spot. I guess Beal didn't have the Knicks on that no trade clause list because he has a really weird contract. One of the few guys like a full no trade clause. And as someone who we're both really involved with baseball and football, we see no trade clauses a lot more common there, right? Because, obviously there's certain franchises you don't really want to go to. The NBA is a little more fluid in that sense. Beal, I guess, really, it just came down to Phoenix and Miami. And I don't know if the Knicks were on that list. I don't know how interested the Knicks were. There was interest. I guess it just never got past, hey, Beal just probably didn't want to be a Knick. I guess that's how I'm going to have to chalk that up to. But, the Knicks are kind of in a weird spot where, as you mentioned, Joel Embiid would obviously be like, I think if the Knicks got Joel Embiid, they'd compete for a title immediately. I think they would become, either the second or third best team in the East. I don't know if I can call them best team in the East because, no disrespect to Embiid, but he hasn't gotten past the second round. So I can't sit here and say, oh yeah, they're definitely better than the Boston Celtics or they're definitely better than the Bucks. I guess they'd immediately become better than the Sixers because they would lose Embiid. So yes, at minimum, they'd be like the third best team in the East. But, ultimately I think that, the Knicks are in a good spot to acquire, not necessarily just a big man, but just someone who can provide, defensive and offensive value because Brunson is a score first guard. Obviously, he's a smaller guy. He's not going to be able to go out there and guard a team's best player. But the Knicks also need spacing. And as you hinted at with Embiid, he does provide that as well. Embiid's a really good shooter. The Knicks could really use that. He's really the perfect fit for the Knicks. Now, it's a matter of whether the 76ers are going to trade him or not, whether he's happy in Philadelphia or not, the situation with his knee, because obviously he had that knee tear, and we don't know if he's going to need surgery on that or not, or maybe it was reported that he did. I haven't followed that entirely too closely. And then the reports that Harden will likely not be coming back. I wonder how that affects Embiid's relationship with the 76ers. It obviously, again, I don't think either of us are going to sit here and try to convince anyone that there is a reason that the Knicks should not be interested in Joel Embiid. Look, I mentioned that he hasn't gotten past the second round, but give him Jalen Brunson and let's see how that goes. No disrespect to James Harden. Actually, I'm not going to say no disrespect to James Harden. This is inherently kind of disrespectful, but the guy's kind of a playoff joker. And I think Jalen Brunson's a playoff riser. I think we've seen that consistently at this point. Now, is Julius Randle necessarily a bad player? No, I've defended Julius Randle on this podcast a lot. I think Julius Randle provides a lot of things that the Knicks need in terms of spacing, scoring aggressiveness, and all that stuff. But I think it's also equally as fair to say, and I don't think anyone would debate us on this, that Julius Randle is not the star that Joel Embiid is. Julius Randle is inconsistent, and that's kind of the issue that happens in the postseason. If it comes down to either having Julius Randle or not having Julius Randle, you'd rather have Julius Randle. But if it comes down to, moving either Brunson or Randle to a company, the other with a second star, you're moving Randle, right? This is clearly Jalen Brunson's team. Jalen Brunson is the best player on this team, and I think he established that in the postseason and the regular season as well. But look, Randle is a two-time All-NBA player now. I do have to give him respect for that. He's the only Knick, I think, to do so in this century outside of Carmelo Anthony, which is kind of crazy to think about. But, end of the day, it's Jalen Brunson's team. Jalen Brunson, they're going to pair. If they acquire a second star, it's going to come to pair with Jalen Brunson. But I guess the question I have for you is, the third highest paid player on this team is RJ Barrett going into next year. Not last year because the contract was a poison pill contract. Didn't kick in last year. With the way he struggled last season, the Knicks needing defense, the Knicks needing three-point shooting, what is the fit for RJ Barrett? Because if you acquire Embiid, he's still the third option. No matter who you acquire, he's the third option. And that role didn't really seem to work for him. So what do you think the Knicks are going to do with RJ Barrett? And does that affect their ability to acquire a star like Embiid, in this offseason or maybe next offseason?
Yeah, look, I have two takes on RJ Barrett. One of them is, if for the right deal, I'd move him. That's the truth. For the right deal, if it made sense and it would boost the Knicks' chance of winning a championship, I would move RJ Barrett. The other side of things, RJ Barrett's 22 years old, guys. He's still a kid. You know what I mean? This guy has so much freaking potential. He's got so much. We see the flashes of it. We see him start shooting. You know, he hit 40% of his shots from the corner like 2 years ago. Like, we've seen him perform well. We know he can drive. We know he can finish. We know he can play decent defense. We know he's got the work ethic. Like, he's got everything you want. He just doesn't do it consistently. And that's kind of the problem with RJ Barrett. Like, he might just be too young. A lot of players don't blossom until they're 24, 25 years old, and that's, you know, okay, but the Knicks have a window, as most would say, right now, with Jalen Brunson in his prime to win a championship. This is the best chance the Knicks are going to get over probably the next decade to win a championship, knowing this organization. We stumbled upon a superstar point guard, and we got to capitalize right now. Anything that we can do to win a championship to boost our odds must happen. If that means going and trading for Joel Embiid, if that means going and getting whoever it might be, we got to make it happen. We got to do it. You know what I mean? Donovan Mitchell, like, maybe that was a good decision we didn't go after him last year because you get Brunson alternatively. But this team needs shooters. This team needs players that can score and score consistently. Joel Embiid is one of those guys. You know, he has had his moments where he flops in the postseason, you know, as a lot of guys do, but he also was dealing with a foot injury and he pushed through it this past year. So I got to give him credit for that. But, you know, he shot 431, you know, from the field, you know, averaged 23.7 points per game. During the postseason, so obviously still a good amount of production. He's entering a 4-year, $210 million deal. He's averaging like $47 million per season, 35% of the league cap. But if you get rid of Randle, you know, there's, I guess you're paying still another $15-16 million on top of Randle's contract that you're replacing. But then you get rid of Fournier. So like if you get rid of Julius Randle and Fournier, that's essentially Joel Embiid. Like that's the way I would describe it. That's his contract. And he has a huge player option at the end of the 4 years, but he'll only be 32 years old. Like he'll still be more than capable of producing at a high level. And he's an MVP, guys. Like if you give Jalen Brunson a player that's going to take the pressure off, that's going to allow him to go 1v1 and drive to the paint. What did the Miami Heat do so well against the Knicks? Pretty simple. They doubled Jalen Brunson, took him out of the game, forced guys like Julius Randle to beat them, forced guys like RJ Barrett to beat them. They were fine giving up points to them because they knew eventually they were going to start missing, and they were going to start missing frequently. Jalen Brunson was the only guy that would consistently hit. Joel Embiid is another guy that can consistently hit. He will take advantage if you're giving him 1v1 matchups. You can't double both Embiid and Brunson, and that's the reality. The Knicks need another player that teams are forced to double in the postseason, or at least essentially that's kind of the concept. Like if you have two players that are forced double teams, forced triple teams, like you can't sustain that level of defense. You can't sustain that level of press, and it allows you to spread guys out. Quentin Grimes, you know, you have Manuel quickly, maybe he comes back. Of course, you got Josh Hart still. Maybe you bring in a guy like Dante DiVincenzo, another Nova guy who I would love to have personally. And if you gave him a couple extra million, I think he just rejected a player option at like $5 million. So like anything more than that's a good thing for him. You know, that's kind of how I feel. Like maybe some people don't want Embiid, but you're gonna find it really hard to find someone that would tell you that this team isn't better with Joel Embiid on it instead of Julius Randle. I mean, I think that's objectively true. It's just a matter of like, does it fit? Is it a good move? It's impossible to say. NBA teams let big names go all the time. They trade big players. Like that's the way it goes. Big contracts don't really mean anything anymore because they move them like it's nothing. If the Knicks go after a guy and they make a big splash like that and they go for a championship, I'm not going to fault them for that, guys. Like, are you going to fault them for trying to win a championship for the first time in a long time? Like, certainly not. There's only so many players that are available. We can throw names out there that are unrealistic, but this is what ESPN had to say recently about it. Specifically, Tim McMullen said they're not hoping for patience. They're hoping for the process. I don't know if that's coming, but they've looked at the situation in Philly, and there's been hope in New York that stuff in Philly will go haywire to the point where Embiid will ask out. So they're really just waiting for Embiid to force his way out of Philadelphia. That's difficult because, you know, Tyrese Maxey, like they're going to have to sign him to an extension. They have Tobias Harris, who's completely fallen off a cliff. James Harden's leaving. So the truth is this. If Philadelphia doesn't go and get a star to pair with Embiid, he's going to get pissed off and force his way out. So the Knicks, they have a choice here. Do they wait and hope to God that the Philadelphia 76ers don't make a trade to pair whoever Embiid wants? Or, you know, do they kind of go a little bit more aggressive and go and get a guy right now and try to sidestep that entire waiting game? Like, that's kind of what I would say. What do you think they should do? What do you think they're going to do?
Yeah, so I think that the Nuggets winning a title gives us a really good model as to what works in the NBA. You need, you know, two really good star players. Now, Jokic is the best player in the NBA, and I just like slammed something. I'm sorry, guys. But Jokic is the best player in the NBA. I don't think anyone is in that conversation right now. I think he's just that good at the sport of basketball. So it's obviously hard to say, oh yeah, just have the best player in basketball. Like, it's not as simple as that. But having 2-star level players, someone that can anchor, and then having role players that can help you anchor your defense and add spacing and, play off of what those two guys do very well. Jokic and Murray are not necessarily a defensively formidable duo. Jokic is solid defensively, but Murray is not a defensive pest. That's not what he's known for. They surround those guys with strong veterans who are able to play defense at a high level. You mentioned Dante DiVincenzo. That would be an excellent fit for the New York Knicks, providing you 3-and-D. That's exactly what the Knicks need. But if Knicks were to acquire a second star, even if for right now it's just Julius Randle, the model has to be that you have 1 star, you have 2 stars, and then the rest of your team is built around, around what those guys don't do well, or in this case, what these guys do well. Mitchell Robinson, of course, helps them a lot defensively, right? Obviously, Brunson and Randle do not provide you much in terms of defense, though Randle's a pretty good rebounder, and I will give him that. And Brunson's good at taking charges, so there's that as well. Quentin Grimes serves an integral role of helping with the spacing, because while Randle does take a lot of threes, he's not uber efficient, so it helps to have a steady shooter like Grimes. And he's also the guy who led the NBA in matchup difficulty defensively, so he helps take pressure defensively off of either of those guys as well. So now you have Grimes and Mitchell and Mitchell Robinson, right? Like, those are two really important pieces and role players in what Randle and Brunson do. That third player, right? And the reason I bring up RJ is because that third player, does it make more sense for it to be a guy like RJ who kind of needs touches, who needs to be involved in the offense and needs to be a ball-dominant guard or ball-dominant wing? Or does it make more sense for it to be a guy like Dante DiVincenzo who can help space the floor even more, who can take on more defensive assignments? Again, Grimes led the NBA in matchup difficulty. The dude's 22. You're going to gas the dude out in the postseason if he's got to take on, Donovan Mitchell, then Jason Tatum, then, Jimmy Butler, right? Like, back-to-back postseason series. It's not going to sustain itself. Having a guy like DiVincenzo helps. That's why you bring in a guy like Josh Hart. He helped with that as well. You obviously have Emmanuel quickly off the bench. Isaiah Hartenstein's an excellent backup big, right? I wonder what they do with Obi Toppin going forward, but in terms of their bench, you feel comfortable with their bench. You feel good about, a lot of the spots on your team right now. You would like to upgrade from Randle in terms of that second star to pair with Brunson, but I think in the same vein, you want to make sure that that 3 spot, that wing spot, is a 3-and-D guy, and I don't think RJ is that right now for the Knicks. And I think from RJ's perspective, is being the third option really the course that you need to take as an NBA player to be the player you think you can be? RJ Barrett was the second option on the Knicks when he was dropping 20 points per game on 40% from 3, when he was a ball dominant shot creator. He's not really that anymore. He can't be that because, again, Brunson and Randle are rightfully so going to get those touches. So I think from a roster construction perspective, you have to start building your lineup the way that championship teams build their lineup, and it's not with a big 3, which the Knicks don't have a big 3 obviously, but it's with you have a good guard, you have a really good wing / forward or big, whatever it may be, to pair with that guard, and then the rest of that lineup is built around covering the deficiencies of those 2 stars. And the Knicks have 2 of those spots figured out. Now it's down to that third spot, and as you hinted at, could you get better from Randle? Yes. If that option doesn't present itself, I think you and I would agree it's not like the Knicks would be bad next year. They just probably wouldn't compete for a title, though they definitely battled with Miami, and that was impressive. But they weren't. They just felt like they weren't consistent enough. And we talk about RJ, we talk about Randle, we talk about hell, even Grimes from 3, right? Just consistency, right? Just they need to find a form of consistency. I think a really strong role player like DiVincenzo, who, as you mentioned, Villanova guy, synergy with Brunson and Hart. I think that would just add that extra layer of consistency. Josh Hart didn't even have a training camp with the Knicks guys, and he just gelled with that lineup, gelled with everyone on that team. Imagine Josh Hart with a training camp with the Knicks. Imagine DiVincenzo with a training camp with the Knicks. Could you imagine Jalen Brunson year 2 with that fit with the Knicks? Randle second year working with Brunson if he is to stay. Mitchell Robinson getting a little more time with that, quickly getting really comfortable in that 6-man spot. Grimes entering year 3. Dylan and I talked about this. This is a big year for Quentin Grimes. Took a huge step last year. Big time from 3. Really good defensively. Can this be the year that a lot of these younger guys start stepping up, right? Again, we're going to sit here, we're going to talk about whether, the Knicks Knicks can go out and go big for a star. But even if they can't, if the Knicks can nail the role players, if the Knicks can nail the surrounding talent around Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle, they'll put themselves at least and have the foundation so that when that star becomes available, because I think Embiid's going to be a matter of when, not if he'll be traded, the Knicks will be a top spot for him to go to. Think about it from his perspective. Even if you have to move Mitchell Robinson to do it, you have Grimes, you have Quickly, you have Brunson, you have Hart, you have potentially DiVincenzo. The spacing is all there for you. The role players are all there for you. It's your team, and the guy you're paired with is a playoff riser. When you feel like you don't have it that game, you can give the ball to Jalen Brunson, and Jalen Brunson will drop 30 on any defense. Jalen Brunson dropped 30 on Mikal Bridges, who's supposed to be this great defensive player, in one half, folks. He carried this team in the Cavs series. He carried this team in the Miami series, and I think he's more than capable of, if you give him a guy like Joel Embiid, good morning, good afternoon, good night, this team will run the East, and I think you just have to put the foundation in place at the very least this offseason.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know what I mean? And one thing that really stood out to me about what you said is about timing. If you have the role players, if you have the guys that are ready to compete in that regard, it's all about timing the acquisition of a superstar like that, even if it's midseason. Like, it could be midseason. Like, the 76ers are sucking. Like, things are not going so well. Embiid's like, I don't want to be here anymore. It doesn't have to be this offseason per se. It could be a midseason acquisition before the deadline that really gets things going, to gives the Knicks that opportunity. But again, like, you want a full season worth of action. You don't want to, like, hope a guy just steps in and gels immediately. So I would prefer it to be before then. I prefer the Knicks to make something happen this offseason and bring in that guy. But, now you look at the Suns, man, like, they have Kevin Durant, they have, ridiculous Bradley Beal and Devin Booker. It's tough to beat. It's really tough to beat. The Knicks are going to need another superstar to actually compete against teams like this. So I think they know that, though. And I think they know that their need to make that big splash is just a matter of waiting for it to unravel so that they can strike and do something aggressive. But guys, always happy to hear your perspectives below. Anything regarding Joel Embiid, or if you have a preference, always happy. I know there's a lot of different combinations out there, so we'll cover all of them and, kind of play devil's advocate and also more of an optimistic viewpoint. So appreciate that as always. We'll catch you guys on the next one, and enjoy the rest of your day.